Hello, Cleveland, and welcome back to the Dogland Podcast. It's been a while, but we're back. It's draft week. We got plenty of content coming at you this week, not only on the podcast, but on the dogland.com as well. But joining me tonight as we kick off draft week is none other than Jack Duffin. Jack, how you doing, buddy? It's been a minute.
I'm doing good. It's good to be back behind a mic for a change. So, yeah, I've been on a unintentional hiatus.
Yeah, and I actually wanted to start right away with that because I seen Paul Brown's tweet yesterday, and like I was absolutely floored. And he said there was you guys got blocked or copyright or because of a copyright because of song licensing. And here I thought it might have been from the intro with I forget the name of the band honestly. That's in your guys' intro.
The Clash London's calling.
Yeah, and then or at the end with Danger Zone by Kenny Loggins because feeling like, people get copyrighted left and right over here in America for song licensing things and videos or anything. And I'm thinking like, man, they finally got him for that. But here, and I will let you explain this, it's from an episode from like when you guys first started back in like 2018. So go ahead and explain what's been going on. What's the update, if you have any, on the status of the podcast, getting it back up off the ground?
Yeah, so effectively it was the end of I think it was a couple of years ago. It was the end of a win we came off, and it wasn't me. I'm the editing on that podcast, luckily. But we used to just throw in some different songs for like 30 seconds at the end of a pod after we won, of just like, hey, mix it up with something. And apparently one of them got flagged by, I think it was Universal. And yeah, we got caught. And the fact that it's ages ago is just nuts. But yeah, that episode's now gone, disappeared forever. But we're waiting for it to go live. So at some point, we're going to be back soon. We're waiting for them. They said, hey, delete the episode and we'll put you back online. We delete the episode and they've now not got back to us. So yeah, soon, guys, we'll be back daily. We haven't run away. Some people assumed it was a battle to the death, and I came out as a winner, which thanks for all those that backed me. But yeah, it's one of them bizarre things that, yeah, weird stuff happens.
So the Paul Brown podcast will be back. We just don't know when. But looking forward to hearing you, Paul, Ian, everybody over there back.
This
on.
might be my pre-draft exclusive. You might get my pre-draft exclusive, and I don't appear anywhere else.
I'm honored, and I'll have to talk to you about something after the draft as well, or about the draft after we're done recording. But you've been a machine since the off season began when it comes to articles, and you pumped out a couple more this week. So I wanted to get you in here to talk about them. Also talk about the draft, obviously. And because I forget, for those that don't know, my name is Jack McCurry. I'm the editor of the dogland.com. I'm also been a co-host here with Anthony Jokey. I forgot to introduce myself, Jack. That's how long it's been. It's been a month since we've done an episode. So kind of forgetting how to do some things around here. But yeah, we're talking about the draft, obviously. And Jack, your first article last week was excellent. Still getting rave reviews. Everybody on Brown's Twitter, it's like every day we're seeing a new somebody posting, hey, this is great work by Jack. Jake Burns did it, Lane Adkins. I mean, everybody in Brown's Twitter has been so supportive of this. You made essentially an analytics draft board, and you took the relative athletic score that's created by Kent Lee Plate, aka Math Bomb, and you took essentially what we know the Browns like in terms of guardrails and all that, and created a draft board using different mock draft simulators. It's really great stuff. If anybody hasn't seen it yet, go to the dogland.com. I will actually put that in the description of this episode just so you guys can check it out. Jack, some fantastic stuff, man, as always, coming from you.
Yeah, it was a really interesting one, and we've been playing around with it, and what we've been doing on the podcast is effectively going through the different days of, hey, day 1, day 2, day 3 for each different position, and then just chatting about the guys basically through everyone, but saying, hey, this guy doesn't match because of age, this guy doesn't match because of lack of athleticism, this guy there's some other issue with, and we've systematically done that. But I thought, hey, well, I want to put it together so I know the list, because it's a useful thing to sit there and watch during draft night and go, hey, well, that's gone. And then if you're like, oh, I really want them to take a tight end or something, and it's like, well, looking at the numbers, there's not really a tight end in this range. It's just sort of useful information to know. And then also just of like, hey, if you listen to podcasts, someone's banging the table going, oh, I really want to draft this guy. And I'm like, well, he's not athletic and he's the wrong age. It's like, he might have great tape, but and lots of it is just guessing. And I'll start with that. It's we've had one draft, and we've seen that they drafted really young guys. And I've actually set an age limit higher than the Browns used last time. So I gave a bit more of a cushion there because we don't know. It could just be small sample and one draft. But yeah, everyone was really, really young. The oldest is Jordan Elliott, and he's 22.7 come week 1 of last season. So that there. And the relative athletic score, there was actually, Bryant was under that threshold that I set, but everyone else was sort of comfortably above it, bar one that was close, which was Nick Harris, was just above the 6.66 that I set. But they do like athletic guys. And then you've got an example, Grant Delpit last year didn't test, so doesn't have a relative athletic score, and thus wouldn't be on my board. So it's not saying, hey, I 100% guarantee they were only going to draft these 88 players that I've found. And it's still a large pool. But it's just a way of sort of narrowing it down and going, hey, this is roughly probably what they're looking at. There will be some crossover. There'll be other guys that there's obviously lots of stuff these scouts do of off-field issues. The quarterback, one quarterback that I pulled up, and quarterback and relative athletic score, they probably don't care that much about, has an issue with Baker off field. So it's like, it's not likely to draft.
Allegedly, we don't know for sure if this guy has a real beef with Baker.
Well, I'll say it. There's loads of other stuff. It's not as simple as you put the numbers in and press return, but it's just really interesting information. And no, I thought that's what I'll put out. And no, it's gone down really, really well. So loads of people seem to have enjoyed it, and just an interesting way of looking at it. And I averaged off 4 different mock draft simulators. The reason I did 4 is because, hey, especially once you get past those top sort of 50 players, you get such variations. And there's some drafts where I'm sat there and, this guy 110, you'd have to draft him to get him, and then I put him into the next one and he's like, he's 350th as a player, and I'm like, right, let's put him in 4 different ones and then we'll see roughly where we're at.
Yeah, I mean it's really great stuff. Like I said, go definitely check it out. Like you have it by position, and then you have it by pick. And I think it's perfect because, some people will say, well, Joe Treon, for instance, you have him as a potential trade down to about the 45th pick. Well, a lot of people are saying he could be a legitimate option at 26, but, based on what you've done with mock draft simulators, you're saying this guy, he's been in the 40s. I know mock drafts and the legit draft are two completely different things, but it's interesting that you have a guy like him at about the 45th pick mark, but he could be a legitimate option at 26, along with guys you have ranked at 26, Jason Owa out of Penn State, Jalen Phillips, Azeez Ojulari, and Gregory Rousseau, who didn't test out very well athletically, but has been linked to the 26th pick. Peter Schrager from Fox Sports and the NFL Network had him as the Browns pick at 26. So it's very interesting the way you assembled it all. And I really like how it's all laid out. And so you go right to the pick, and then you see what options are there at each position. It's really simple, as any Browns fan can look at it and be able to read it and understand what you're trying to do here.
Yeah, and it's about making it really approachable. There's no point going into big details on, hey, well, why am I excluding this person? Why is that? And sort of a long write-up. It's very much just sort of it's a handy, nice guide that you can just flick to. And lots of people, this is something I've really enjoyed. Lots of people have taken it and done their own mock drafts with these different simulators and gone in their head of going, right, I'm going to base it on, I can't draft anyone not on this list. And they'll sit there and then play with it. And I've had loads of people tweet me and gone, hey, I've used the guardrails you put together and the guardrails board. Here's the draft I come up with. And loads of people are like, well, I love that mock. And people have tweeted it, and you've got people like Stephen Thomas have said, hey, I'd be really happy with that as a draft. And it's like, that's sort of a testament to it. It's not ridiculous what they've put together. And there was sort of lots of fears when Berry came out. I think was it 114 or 124 players. He said
114.
that they have draftable grades on, and people are like, what? They're not going to draft someone out of the top like 120 picks. And it's like, well, no, because that's spread out through the entire draft. And obviously, it's one that in hindsight I probably should have tweaked the way I did it. But I sort of excluded anyone that was going to be gone by 26, sort of a high round quarterbacks, high round linebackers, high round offensive tackles, because a player like Penny Sewell probably would be on their board. Whereas I was just like, Penny Sewell's not going to be there, get rid of him. Which, yeah, made more use for what I was trying to build it for. But because mine was all done before Andrew Berry did his interview and said 114, if I'd have done it before, I'd have said, right, sorry, let's put everyone in. And I could have probably, maybe next year, I'll list a secondary list on the bottom that has guys that we have a great relative athletic score but no age, or we have an age but did not test for a relative athletic score, and put them in sort of the unknowns at the bottom. So maybe next year, got some tweaks and changes, and I'll keep some blacked out areas which there's not a player listed, but then I might put them in white writing just to be like, well, we're not going to draft this guy, but he would be on the list.
Yeah, I mean, you look back at last year, Grant Delpit did not test. All you had was his age, his height, and his weight. But, I mean, I think the Browns might have something similar to this in their draft room, to where they have everything laid out in terms of data like you put together. But at the same time, it's only a piece of the puzzle. I'm sure the scouts all said this guy is great talent. You can get him in the middle second round. The Browns actually peeled back. They were at pick 41. They moved back a couple of spots, gained an extra pick, and still took Delpit. He might have been higher on their board, and they had nothing to base it on, athletic profile wise, but they seen what they liked on tape. They heard everything that the coaches and their teammates had to tell them. And that's why they went ahead and made Delpit a second round pick. So I think they use this. I think they could use something like this definitely as a piece of their puzzle. It wouldn't shock me if Barry and all the analytics guys had something similar to this in their front office as well.
100%. Age we know is important to them, but I think after the 2022 draft, we'll be able to sit there and go, right, we've really got a good idea for these. And there was a weird stat I saw, because I was looking around at the data. And in the article, I've got all the data for the draft class last year. But I was looking at the UDFAs, and I don't think it was in there either. But they didn't draft anyone under 6 foot. And that, I think, is just by luck. I don't think that's an intentional line. But that's something that's going to be really, really interesting to look at next year. After the draft this year, because who knows, that could be something where they're like, hey, we don't want smaller players in the draft. We'll happily add them to the roster if they come up. I'm not saying it's hey, we don't want. I got my boy Troy Hill. They've obviously got Ward, but that might be something where they're like, actually, we think height's important. We're not going to say no to it, but if we're just drafting guys and we're taking almost punts on them, we do value height. So no, it's one of them things that I mentioned it because I don't think it's any sort of red line there. But if you've got 7 draft picks and they're all over 6 foot, then it's the sort of thing that, hey, it's a data point. And if we go through an entire draft this year and everyone's over 6 foot, then we're probably going to be sat here in 2022 going, if they're under 6 foot, you probably want to take them off your draft board. Sorry, Elijah Moore. Sorry, Samuel at the cornerback. It could be the case. It's going to be an interesting one to keep an eye on.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this weekend we'll really test that because a lot of the wide receivers are below 6 foot. Obviously, you mentioned Asante Samuel Jr., the corner. He's below 6 foot. So that theory that's only been, one draft deep could be put to the test this weekend. Definitely, if they continue to draft guys over 6 foot, that could be a trend going forward that they will not take guys smaller than 6 foot tall, which is interesting, but I mean, that could be something they look at data wise and say, hey, we like our guys to be taller. Especially, I think Joe Woods, because of his background, does he like taller corners or does he like the smaller ones? Obviously, we have smaller ones currently on the roster, but if we draft a corner, say that's 6 foot or taller, and maybe we double dip and draft two, that could be a trend going forward where Joe Woods likes taller athletic corners in his secondary. So definitely gonna be something to watch.
Yeah, and even looking at the UDFAs, 10 different UDFAs, all 6 foot plus. So, yeah, crazy, crazy, crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's kind of go ahead and continue talking about the draft. Before we get to your other article, obviously we're looking at pick 26. There has been scuttlebutt about trading up, and I know you don't like that conversation, Jack. But looking at Greg Newsome, that's obviously I think been the hot name. There's been two hot names, I would say. Greg Newsome, the corner out of Northwestern, and Rashad Bateman, the wide receiver out of Minnesota. Jack, I don't know if you would agree or disagree, but if they were to move up, I feel like those might be the only two guys they would consider moving up for. And if they're going to do it, and I think it was Stephen Thomas and Jeff Lloyd, they were on the Not the Same Old Browns podcast. They said if they're going to do it, they're going to have to go into the teens. So based on what you've read, watched out of those two guys, would you be a proponent of trading up to add one of those two to the roster? Not even talking about just trading up the cost, etc., but looking at the talent. Would you be a proponent of moving up for one of those guys if that was the apple of Andrew Berry's eye?
Yeah, so for me, the reason why it's just I'm against the whole logic of trading up is only 12 out of 32 draft picks as good on average will get a second contract with a team that draft them. And that just says teams are really, really bad at drafting players, and especially at the corner position, which is something we can touch on in the next article. And it's like, do I want to take that extra risk? And even at wide receiver, hey, we can look back the last two drafts. There's been so many amazing wide receivers drafted in the second round. What makes me feel that this guy is so much better than everyone else? And last year, if you were turning around to anyone and saying, Jeffrey Okudah, I don't think he's very good, you'd have been laughed at. And a year later, I don't think if you were banging the table and go, Jeffrey Okudah, that guy's got the potential to be a Hall of Famer, people are now probably laughing at you after 1 year. And that's how quickly it can all change. So for me, that's why I'm not sure on the trading up. I was actually thinking about this a lot earlier today. If you're going to trade up, maybe from 59, but I think if you're going to balance it out, you're probably more like to trade down from 26, but then trade up from 89. I think that's probably the pick where you trade up from. If there's someone you like falling into, say, the 70s, and then, yeah, I would say that's the one you jump from. I think you'd move from, let's say, 89 to 75, maybe. If you're going to look at a Browns trade up, I'd say that's the pick.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I don't think they'll trade up, but I'm not leaving it like I'm necessarily going to say that's not going to happen. I feel like if they want Newsome and say he's around 17, 18, and they know he's not going to get there, and I don't think he'll get there, I think they start calling those teams like 17, 18, 19 and trying to move
Colts.
up.
Be the Colts.
Because the Colts are what, like 20 or 21?
It'll be the Colts at 21 because
yeah.
he's definitely gone at 22 to the Titans.
Yeah.
The Colts might take him, but the Colts are a team that's always up for a trade down. So,
and the Browns have history with them the last couple of drafts.
Yeah, if there's going to be a trade down, keep an eye on the Colts. Trade up. The Colts would be the one that I could legitimately see it happen. And it's actually a trade that Peter King predicted in his article yesterday.
He did, yeah. But I feel like the Colts, there is history there. We traded up, I think it was, to get Greedy, and then we traded down with them last year to get Delpit. So there is history there, even with two different regimes. Like, I think the phone lines are definitely open between Ballard and Barry. So that would be something to watch, but I don't see at the same time the Colts and Titans are right there with us in the hunt of the AFC. Are they really going to help us when they want that player? I don't think so.
But I you hear lots of people say this, but I think it's the opposite, that most smart teams, they know that trading down's better than trading up.
True.
And if you genuinely believe that, why do you care about allowing another team to jump up? Because if you're a proponent, let's say you're drafted 6, for instance. We're not talking about quarterback. Don't get into the quarterback argument. We're talking about non-quarterback. If you went, well, someone's offering 2 first-round picks to come up, would I be saying, I can take the Steelers, the Ravens, the Bengals 2 first-round picks and give them 1 first-round pick, and whoever gets the 2 first-round picks is in so much better position? I'd be like, yeah, I'd do that. Because it's not about that one player they get, it's the 2 players that you're taking from them. So I get why teams are sometimes hesitant to do it, especially when it's a quarterback. But when it's a non-quarterback, I'd be all over that. I'd be like, yeah, you can jump up here, and I'll steal your picks. The Bengals, if the Bengals went, I'll give you 2 seconds, and you can have our pick at 26. I'll be like, yeah, do that. I'll let the Bengals jump up because we'll have their pick. So I think a smart team would be all over that because you're screwing your opposition.
Very true. Very true. So if they stay at pick 26, Jack, based on what you've read, what you've watched, who is your ideal target at if they're there? I mean, it's hard to say because we're at pick 26. We don't know how the first 25 is going to shake out besides 1 and 2. Who are you liking there at 26?
For me, Greg Newsome's my favorite. There. Then Bateman's nice, but I'm leaning probably more towards an edge.
Okay.
Just because I feel good about we can get wide receiver on
day 2,
the second round.
Yeah.
I'm sort of those top 4 picks. I need a cornerback. I need an edge. I need a wide receiver.
Absolutely.
Don't care too much on the order. And ideally, yeah, the other one, probably a safety is where I'd like to lean, but I don't mind if it's sort of an interior defender. I don't really mind if it's anything. You can go anywhere with that. That extra top 400 pick is almost a wild card. Do whatever. You could double dip at corner. But yeah, I'm not as high on Bateman as some of the others. I would love Quitty Pay to be there, but he's just never going to be there.
No, there's no way.
But yeah, I think Newsome's gone by 22, so it makes it harder for me to go, I'm going to take a corner, because I'm like, Stokes and Samuel are good, Melifonwu's good, but I'm not like, I desperately want these guys. I'm like, I'll trade back, and if one of them will be there at 45, 46, so I don't mind. In terms of that edge group, Phillips does intrigue me. As long as the medical's there. Farley, I can't see being there. If the Browns feel comfortable enough that he's on their board, which according to Lane Atkins he is, then he's not going to be there. Just if you're going to draft someone, I think Bateman will be there. I'm going to say go for Bateman then.
Yeah. Lane said he was on with Jake Burns Sunday night. He said that he doesn't think Bateman will be there, but I think if he's there, I think he's definitely in the discussion. So you got to think. I've said this numerous times. Go back to last year. CeeDee Lamb was in the discussion at 10. We ended up taking Wills because I don't think they thought Wills was going to be there. So they obviously went with Wills, but Lamb was obviously in the discussion, which is a year ago we were looking at wide receiver. I feel like this is something that Barry does look at, regardless of the contract situation with Beckham and Landry going into 2022 and beyond. If they can find playmakers, impact playmakers, I think they're going to be heavily in the discussion. And Bateman and Jake Burns brought this up. Last year, you can't really look at 2020 because he had COVID. He lost 20 pounds. He wasn't the same player. You go back and look at 2019, he was one of the best receivers in the country. It was amazing for Minnesota. So I do think he'll be. I think he might be there at 26. I tend to think like if Lane Atkins doesn't think he's going to be there, I trust Lane because he knows what he's talking about when it comes to football. So if he's not there, obviously, and I don't think Newsome would be there. If he's there at 26 somehow, that would be a shocker. I do think they'll go edge just because Clowney's on a 1-year deal. Tech McKinley's on a 1-year deal. They need to look at something just in case neither one of them work out. Uh, I like Jalen Phillips, but the concussions thing worries me. So I'm at the point where I would look at Joe Treon or Jason Owa, or even if they peel back a little bit, they could still get one of those guys. But even if they don't get one of them, Peyton Turner looks really nice based on, what I've seen, what people are talking about. They can get a nice edge rusher at 59, or if they move up from that spot. So there's tons of options there. I'm just ready for Thursday night to get here and see how it all shakes out.
Yeah, and the reason why wide receivers really, really important, and lots of people, whether it's with the Bengals at 5, people are chatting about, hey, Penny Sewell or Jamar Chase. How much does an elite offensive lineman make a difference? And Joe Thomas. Joe Thomas is not just an elite, he is Hall of Fame left tackle. Hall of Fame. Easy. How much difference did he make during his time? And that's a genuine question that you can ask of, like, did he take a okay quarterback and make him a great quarterback? No. He was incredible at what he did, but it's where that, if you gave someone, hey, this is going to be turn it into an elite offensive line, that's great, but it's not, because it's not just Joe Thomas. You're relying on 4 other dudes to be good next to him. As long as they're good, it's fine. But one, 2 people struggle. It doesn't matter that Joe Thomas is amazing if the other side of the line's not good enough. Whereas if you look at how good these elite wide receivers make their quarterback, and everything's got to be, everyone understands that quarterback's the most important position. Well, then the next question comes back after you find a good quarterback is how do we make the quarterback better? And it's about having talent at wide receiver. Wide receiver is the most important position. It doesn't matter about your running back, your tight end, all your other stuff. That's nice to have. The elite wide receiver really makes a difference, because that just makes your quarterback's life easier. They can miss by half a yard and that wide receiver is going to get it. It's not going to be a pick 6 and go the other way. That sort of stuff, it makes a world of difference. So there's no reason taking a wide receiver that high. So no, I think it's certainly in the discussion. A smart front office like this, and yeah, Corey Coleman, it wasn't a good pick, but they do know the positional value. It is very, very, very strong. And if you're saying wide receiver isn't important, then you're also saying a quarterback isn't important. And that is nuts in the modern NFL. Those 2 positions are more closely linked than any other.
Absolutely. The thing with the Bengals, though, I feel like a lot of people are saying, like, take Penei Sewell or even Rashawn Slater at 5. Joe Burrow got his butt kicked last year. And here's the thing with the Bengals. They have Mixon, they have Higgins, they have Boyd. They did lose AJ Green, so they don't have a legit number 1 wide receiver. But if Burrow's not going to be protected, and, I'm obviously the Bengals are going to be a threat if he stays healthy and is as good as advertised. If he's not getting protected, that's a waste of a number 1 overall pick on Joe Burrow, because he's just going to get damaged. He's going to get taken to the woodshed. He's going to end up like Tim Couch and David Carr. He's going to get beat up constantly. Like, the Browns had playmakers at receiver, but they didn't have a line to protect him in the early 2000s. And that's why it baffles me when people label Tim Couch a bust. And it's like, did you see the offensive line he was behind during his start of his career? Like, Jamar Chase is great, and he would make the Bengals offense exciting and would potentially fill the void that AJ Green's left behind. But if he doesn't have a line, like, you're never going to see how good Joe Burrow truly is. And I feel like that's why a lot of people are shaking their head at the Bengals for taking a wide receiver over an offensive tackle when that's been a pressing need for a year now.
If I was the Bengals, I'd obviously be banging the drum for trade down. But if they're going to pick, then I'll get me Chase, and you can then spend you can spend 2 and 3 on a O-line. You can spend a pick next year on O-line. I'm not saying don't invest in the O-line, but it's for me, it comes down to the question of, if you're going to have one that's elite, is it an offensive tackle or is it wide receiver? And then I'm not saying the rest can be all good or great. What difference does, if you can have one elite, is it for me an offensive tackle or is it for me a wide receiver? I want to chase the elite wide receiver and the good to great O lineman, wherever that might be across the 5 O line positions. And that for me is where do I want my elite to be? I want my elite number one position is wide receiver. Then it's number one's quarterback, number two is wide receiver. And then after that, it probably might be interesting between an edge and corner discussion there, because if you've got one elite corner, then he's just going to throw it the other corner.
Or, just hypothetically, they take Penei Sewell or Rashawn Slater at 5, and then in the late first round, you move up and you get Terrence Marshall, Elijah Moore, maybe Rashad Bateman if he's there. You hop the Browns at 26 and you go and get a wide receiver. Then you get both.
Yeah, there's loads of tackles in the draft.
Not as good as Sewell and Slater.
But Jonah Williams is the only position that's good on the O line. They've got one left tackle and nothing else. So
and he's as damaged
another left tackle.
And Jonah Williams is as damaged as Joe Burrow. So it's like it's nothing to bank on, though. I'm trying to think of another draft question. Okay, so say they go edge round 1, the Browns. You're looking at day 2. They got 59, 89, and 91. You said corner, safety, receiver. Is that what you?
The top 2 picks at the moment.
Yeah.
One of the top 2 picks has to be a corner as things stand today.
See, I would, if say they go edge and they don't move up or move down from 26, I would move up from 59 because I don't think they're going to make 9 picks. Would you agree with that?
I'm not sure on this. And lots of people are saying, hey, I just can't see them making 9 picks.
I know one of the guardrails is churn the bottom of the roster. So I'm kind of leaving the door cracked open that they'll draft 9 players, because then they can say, well, this player will go. Sheldrick Redwine's gone, we'll add another safety, or Kadero Hodge is gone, we'll add a receiver there. So like I could see them adding 9 picks. I just don't know if it's going to happen.
But the piece I wrote, what was it? It feels like a couple of months ago. I think it was like 2 weeks ago, on what potential, not holes, but roster spots are up for grabs with the Browns. I got to 15. And that was before Sheldon Richardson got released.
That's
true. 16. And it's like, well, why couldn't you bring a rookie in? You bring in sort of a wide receiver. There's an offensive tackle spot up. There's a
I'm pulling up that article right now.
There's no reason why you couldn't draft a tight end 4. And people go, well, you don't need a tight end 4. And it's like, well, why not? Stephen Carlson isn't going to be a tight end 2 or a tight end 3 on this roster. So if you're sat there and pick 110 and you've got a tight end you like, draft him. The running back 3, you can bring someone in. Dearness Johnson, you no reason you need to keep him. I think they can easily bring in 9 draft picks. Would I? No. I'm more interested in, right, once they sit there and they're like, oh, we're happy, let's flip it into a next year pick. I would be crazy, and I would say you don't draft anyone in round 1. You always trade down from round 1 for 2 second-round picks, and then you take all your picks in rounds 4 to 7, and you trade them up a round, and we only draft on day 2 of the draft. I would love that.
I know nuts, you would.
But you would have, what, 6 third-round, 6 day 2 picks every year? Why not?
That'd be
Go
fun.
Crazy.
Oh God, Thursday night would be terrible. They trade down, they'll be drunk.
But it's coming.
Oh yeah,
so it wouldn't be all right. It'd be all right. You're like, oh, well, we Browns fans, you only have to tune in for one night of the draft, and we're going to make 6 or 7 picks. Happy days.
So, the article, I pulled it up because this is what you said. 15 spots. You said you could see us adding a running back / fullback, 2 wide receivers, a tight end, an offensive tackle, 2 edge defenders, a linebacker. You said 5 DBs. Now this is free agency and the draft. And then you said 2 special teamers. So
yeah, so there could be like them adding free agent like Steven Nelson or something, but there's 15 open spots.
Yeah, because you said this with the premise that they add, this is before we signed Clowney. So you said if they add Clowney, Steven Nelson, and you mentioned Carl Joseph, who signed with the Raiders, so take him off. But yeah, I mean, I could see them adding at least 1 wide receiver, a tight end, maybe late, maybe an undrafted guy. Offensive tackle, I don't see, but interior. I do, because I'm not sure they're sold completely on Dunn, Enhance, and Forbes. So I think
But they could
interior.
just draft a tackle and then slip Hubbard inside. Hubbard was the PFF's 11th best guard last year, so they
This
could
is
be
true.
looking at and going, well, rather than pay a white teller 12 million a year potentially, they could go, Hubbard's actually quite good. Let's give Hubbard 3.5 million a year on a 2-year deal, so 7 million over 2, and then go not this coming season, season after, and go, why not? Well, let's draft someone, and if the draft pick doesn't work out on say day 3, it's not a bad idea that if people are that high on Bill Callahan that he's amazing and he can work all this magic, well, you don't have to have the most expensive O-line in the NFL, because you've got to be saying, hey, we trust this guy and he's incredible, or Bill Callahan's only really good because he's got the best most expensive offensive line in the NFL. So it's that kind of. It wouldn't surprise me if they do some interesting stuff like that, because as well, it means you keep Joel Bitonio longer. It's not saying, hey, we're going to go cheap here. It's saying, right, rather than get rid of Joel Bitonio and pay Wyatt Teller, you're going to go, right, let's sort of edge this around. So, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they add an offensive tackle, because, hey, Jack Conklin could be gone in 2 years' time. And I know that's 2 years into the future, but draft now.
They're looking ahead. Barry
Let's draft
said it.
someone in the 3rd, 4th round. And if you sat there and, hey, they just swing tackle for 2 years, and then you're like, actually, Browns fans don't mind that Jack Conklin leaves, because we've got this guy that we drafted in the 3rd, 4th round. Bill Callahan's turned him into a guy. He had to come in and play 2 games because someone went down, and he's the absolute nuts.
Absolutely. As we ramp things up, you wrote another great article. It went out this morning. You actually been sitting on this for a couple of weeks, and we finally unleashed it onto the Browns fan base. It was, the title of it is, "Where are the best players drafted by position, and why should we care?" And Jack, I'm always amazed, because when I go to look at these to edit them, and you've been telling me about this for weeks, and I go and start reading it, and it's just like, holy crap, dude. The time you take on these articles is amazing. I'm always impressed. You went very in depth, and you broke it down position by position, and you use data, and you just say, this is where wide receivers should be drafted, or this is where offensive tackles should be drafted. And dude, it's kudos to you, man. You put the work in, and it's fantastic work, and it doesn't go unnoticed, because we always get solid feedback from everybody on it.
All right, cheers. This one, yeah, I think we've been shooting DMs about this for about 10 months.
Oh, yeah.
This has been going on for ages. So effectively, I just went through the last, we got 10 years of PFF data, and just went, right, where's the best players each year drafted according to PFF? And so I'm saying, hey, the best player in 2015, which round or pick was he drafted in? Average it off. And the average is interesting from the number, but what really interested me was, hey, what percentage of players are taken in the day 1, in day 2, day 3 UDFAs, just to get that sort of feeling of like, hey, where are the best players taken? Because Quentin Nelson was an interesting discussion for me a couple of years ago, where I felt like him in the draft. I was like, look, he's the only player that I felt was a lock to make the Hall of Fame. Not Baker, not anyone else. He was the only one where I looked at him and went, that guy he's something else. And at the same time, I would have been horrified if the Browns drafted him. And it's not so much position, it is positional value, but it's also that, why are you getting a guard in the 1st round? You don't need to reach that high to get a guard. And that's sort of a lot of what this article stemmed from. And it's, hey, out the top 25% of guards in the NFL each year, 42% of them are taken on day 2. So it's like, well, why are you really drafting someone on day 1? 25% of them went on day 1. So it kind of works off of that. And no surprise, the highest percentage for players taken on day 1 is quarterback, 71% of them. Obviously, you've got the exceptions like your Brady in there, really dragging day 3 up to 14%. But it's one that it's really interesting to look at that. And the two other positions that are up there is edge defender and offensive tackle. They're the only two over 50% of great starters, top 25% players in the NFL, get drafted in that first round. So if you're looking for that stud at quarterback, at tackle, and edge defender, you pretty much need to look in the first round. And that was sort of an interesting note for me to go, hey, I've always been a fan of the trade down, but these are probably 3 positions, and I knew quarterback was in there. I was on record a year ago saying, hey, unless you need a quarterback, why are you using the first round pick? Let's go and get multiple first round picks instead. But it goes because it's not always about, hey, this is what I value. I'd wait on this. I'd wait on that. It's one of going, well, if the NFL is really, really high on a position and all of the best players are going in the first round, you can't afford to wait till day 2 sometimes because everyone's gone. And obviously there's exceptions. In the same way, though, no one's drafting anymore at pick 199 and going, it's a good spot to find a Hall of Fame quarterback. It's just nuts. Don't look at the exception. Look at the standard grouping.
Was there anything in this that like surprised you looking over the data?
Yeah, so one that really stood out to me was when we started looking at UDFAs. So new running back was going to be high. 16% of UDFAs, 16% of running backs who are great are UDFAs. We knew that. You can get running back anywhere. But the one that stood out was cornerback. And I know it's harder for PFF to sort of grade coverage. It's not as binary as passing a ball, catching a ball, rushing a quarterback. It's more complex. But according to their data, 20% of the top 25% of cornerbacks in the NFL, so you great players, we're not talking the elite, we're not talking just the above average, we're talking great. The UDFAs, which really, really surprised me. And sort of, I started chatting to PFF Brad, great follower, and just said, this doesn't, the number doesn't seem right. And he was saying, well, it sort of depends what you're looking for in a cornerback. If you're looking for someone that plays press man coverage, them guys do actually really need to be high. Whereas if you're more of a zone scheme, you can pick up zone corners basically anywhere. And there's that part of the divide into it. Obviously, you've then got slot corners, which aren't drafted as high. They aren't paid as much, even though they're really important. So, yeah, that was sort of a particular interest that I saw. And I was like, that's an interesting one to note, because some positions, it's like, hey, well, yeah, you need some UDFAs that you pick up just to fill out your camp roster and make sure you've got bodies. But almost you need to be targeting these ones like cornerback, like running back. Interior defender did quite well, whereas some of the other positions, quarterback, 3%, tight end, 6%, center, 8%, 9% at wide receiver. Those are positions where you're unlikely to find anything awesome from a UDFA.
The best thing on this, and this is, you're basing it on your top 25% thing, 2% of kickers were a day 1 pick. And I think there's only one, and it was Janikowski.
That is. Well, in the notes, I went pretty strong here. I went, my take on kickers.
Here, I'll read it. It says, if you're spending a day 1 or 2 picks on a kicker, then you should really be fired before you make your next selection. Even a day 3 pick is wasteful based on the numbers. And I can remember, because I was with you on your podcast when they drafted Cyber, and we both didn't like it, just because why are we drafting a kicker in the 5th round? Like, it's, if you draft a kicker, or even if you draft a punter, like I think Jacksonville drafted a punter before Russell Wilson in 2012. Like, what are we doing here, people? Like, and then Tampa, and this is a great tweet I seen today, they traded up for Aguayo. That same GM just won the Super Bowl and brought back every single starter. So it's like, you get some chances, and sometimes those chances don't work out. But I mean, if you're drafting a specialist in day 2 or even day 3, it's just baffling.
Yeah, no, it's crazy some of the stuff we see, and it just goes to show it's like being smart isn't good enough, and being stupid doesn't guarantee you're going to struggle in the NFL. It's a weird old world, but no, it's one that it's about trying to find these little edges, and it's balancing that. Hey, here's my positional value argument, or here's the reality of it, and then just sort of working out between the two what you decide. And I just thought it'd be interesting, and it definitely turned out that way. This one, just to sort of come together with a list. I've included the top 10%, and the top 50% I think is more important. The top 10% is a bit of a hey. If you're trying to chase elite, where does it come from? But in the same time, how often are you sat there in a draft and going, yeah, we feel this guy is going to be a top 3 quarterback in the NFL or top this, because there's just so few. Whereas if you're saying, hey, a top 8 quarterback, a top 8 running back, a top 8 tight end, a top 8 center, that's a realistic thing to chase. Ideally, top 16, top half of the league. That should always be the goal. But no, it's sort of it's just an interesting data set to sort of look at and sort of see, hey, what should we do, and sort of just understand about positional scarcity. And wide receiver, I thought was an interesting one. The fact that what are we at with wide receiver? It's basically 75%, just over 75% of the top wide receivers go by the end of day 2. So while fans are like, oh, let's take a punt on wide receiver on day 3, there's a good chance it's basically a wasted pick. You're going to get someone like, hey, we're hoping Donovan Peoples-Jones becomes something. And it's not saying, yeah, once you get past that threshold, oh, everyone's crap. But it's also then looking at something and going, hey, center, 38% of centers who are great are taken in day 3. So where you got some of these teams looking at taking a center potentially at a late first round, they're nuts. And it's finding those little things and just going, he might turn out to be the best center in the NFL, but does it matter?
Yeah, I mean, J.C. Treader was a day 3 pick. Nick Harris was a day 3 pick. I mean, you tend to see, I mean, you could look at this and then you think back to certain picks and it was like, yeah, you can find a starting center day 3. You can find depth at corner and turn them into like 24% of day 3 corners were end up in the top 25 by your data. Richard Sherman was a 5th round pick. I mean, that's the best case. I mean, you look, people were like, people trashed the Seahawks draft, I think in 2011, and most of those guys ended up in 2011 and 2012. Like 2 years later, they won the Super Bowl. So it's like, as long as you have good scouting and you know what you're doing, you can build a competent roster. You can find gems in the late rounds based on what you're looking at, and you looking at this data and you're saying like, hey, we can find certain positions in these rounds. You could become a Super Bowl contender. As long as you know what you're doing, you know what you're looking for, and you know you can get it in certain rounds. As long as you put the right pieces together, success is made any day of the draft.
Yeah. No, there's certainly opportunities there, and it's just trying to play an edge. We started the show by saying, hey, 12 out of 32 picks in the first round are the ones that are going to be successful, get a second deal on average. But if you can play a small edge, and as I was just mentioning what happened in Tampa was an awfully run organization, and then they won the Super Bowl. So you've just got to play your edges, and then it's a lot of luck. Luck is the biggest factor.
Absolutely.
And so, yeah, you've just got to see how it rolls. But no, it's really nice. From the past couple of off seasons where Jack can attest to this, I spent most of my time swearing and just unhappy that we'd make what I'd consider yet another stupid move. And no, it's been a thorough joy. Not the last couple of seasons, the 2 before last season. So last season was okay. But no, I thought we failed to address my preference for a slot corner, and Andrew Berry did me a solid this year, so it's all good.
Did you order your Troy Hill jersey yet?
No.
Are you going to?
No.
Do I need to send it to you?
I don't think I'm ordering any jerseys this year.
Well,
I might order some more Browns wear, but it's more going to be like jumpers and T-shirts and stuff.
Well, just get ready for that. When Nick Chubb signs his contract extension, get ready for that Chubb jersey to come in the mail.
Just on Chubb, if the Richardson release, if there's anything I point to that making the most sense, that's potentially half of Nick Chubb's 25 million salary. So, yeah. And people are going, well, who cares about this? Who cares about the money this year? And I'm like, that's
rollover.
Exactly. That's great if you want to have that strategy, but that is Nick Chubb gone off your roster. Oh, but he's not up this year. And it's like, well, if you go and spend all your savings when you've got the most second most expensive roster in the NFL, well, you've got no money. So, I would, if I had to point to a player and who was the biggest winner from the Sheldon Richardson release, I would say it's Nick Chubb's career in Cleveland.
Without a doubt. Like when I've seen that, how much cap space we had, everybody's like, oh, we're going to go sign Steven Nelson, or we're going to go do this and this. And I'm like, we might sign a couple more players, but I think we're going to roll that cap over and just add more flexibility. Over the cap is weird right now because it says we only have $9 million in cap space next year, but I feel like we have more. But because I could have sworn we had like 40 million, right when free agency started, unless something changed. Obviously the projected salary cap is a little different. So, but I feel like we're going to have like
205 million next year.
Yeah. But, I thought we had more cap space next year, but I could be wrong. But roll the cap space over and continue to create flexibility. That's what this front office is doing.
They haven't got the cap rollover added into that, I don't think.
Yeah, I'm not sure. But
yeah.
But honestly, like cap roll, like the cap rollover and draft capital, like if they trade down Thursday night, Jack, it would not shock me if 2022 picks are what they get back in return.
Oh, in addition to they're going to chase.
Yeah, because they like to have draft capital. They like to have this flexibility because they're setting themselves up long term. It's not just going to be everybody's like, oh, we got to go for it now. No, we don't. Like continue. We are a Super Bowl contender right now with this roster. I would rather be a Super Bowl contender this year and the next year and the next year and the next year. Like we don't have to go all in. Like maybe we make a trade for Stephon Gilmore. I may have made a bold take like that on another podcast, but yeah, I mean,
I think you said Steve Nelson's name wrong.
Well,
why do I want to give up a 3rd round pick for Gilmore when I can get Steve Nelson for free?
Well, Jack, it was a bold take.
Chase my value.
But
it's aggressively chasing value, and that's what lots of people don't understand. When you say aggressive, lots of people confuse that with wasteful, and it's like you don't have to overspend just to be aggressive.
Yeah,
you're aggressively chasing every edge and bit of value as possible, and that does mean moving on from a player like Richardson. So no, it's an interesting one on what they do. As you said, they want to be sustainable with this. They want to sit here and have a 10-year window where the Browns are in the playoffs 9 out of 10 years. And that's what I want as a team. It was Ozzie Newsome when he was running the Ravens said, our goal every year is to make the playoffs. Once we get there, there's lots of luck and lots of other stuff. But basically the goal has to be every year from a front office perspective, make the playoffs. And that for me is all I want. Let's play January football. If we get there 9 times in the next 10 years, it's a good chance we end up winning it. If you spend loads of money and you get there next year, who knows? Baker goes down halfway through the season. Well, that's over. We can go into a 5-year rebuild to make sure we get our roster in the right position. That's not what I want. I want to be at this every year. And I'm up for them ruthlessly chasing value. Quite frankly, we've got the head coach, we've got the quarterback, we've got the GM. Purge everyone else whenever you need to. I really don't care. Everyone else is just along for the ride. I don't care whether you're my favorite players or you're my least favorite players. You're all irrelevant in the grand scheme of it, and that's just life. And that's the way the NFL works. It's about them three people: GM, head coach, quarterback. Everything else is noise. None of them are that crucial to winning. None of them are that crucial to losing. It just comes down to good decisions by the front office, good coaching, and good quarterback play. And if we've got those three, happy days, we're competing for Super Bowls.
Absolutely. At the end of the day, that's the goal. The goal is to compete for Super Bowls and not just one. I know everybody's like, well, we just need one. One is nice. One is nice because obviously, like what the Cavs did a few years ago, that was amazing. But I'm thinking back now because of things that happened, we could have had 3 or 4. I would take 3 or 4 over one. As much as the one was amazing, I want multiple Super Bowls. I want the Browns to get back to what they were at the beginning of their franchise. And this is the 75th year. It's been a long time since we won one, but I don't want just one. I want 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Like I want to go Brady status with Baker and Stefanski and Barry. And like, that's the ultimate goal. And I feel like they're going to add more pieces to that on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. But you got to keep the train rolling. Like one would be great, but multiple would be even nicer just because we could say we have multiple Super Bowls, but also just to shut the rest of the NFL fan bases up saying, oh, calling the Browns, the frowns, the clowns, everything else. Like get them back to the dynasty that they were in the 40s and 50s is the ultimate goal.
Oh yeah, 100%. I follow sport over this side of the pond, and hey, you win something. By the time the season starts again, that's gone. That was last season. I'm over it. It's give me the next one, and that's all I'm interested in. I've said for years the whole idea of the tank, the rebuild, it was to build something sustainable. I don't want a 1-2 year blowout and then it's like, oh yeah, we're going to go into a rebuild. Oh, for God's sake, I don't want to go through that. And however fun, and I love what the Dolphins have done. I loved what the Browns did. Amass resources, spend loads of resources, but continue spending. There's no reason why you can't have 2 first-round picks every single year. People are like, what? And I'm like, yeah, I want 2 first-round picks every year. That whole idea was like, yeah, just continue to absolutely throw in resources there again and again and again and again. And why not? But, enjoy the edge until stupid teams start becoming smart teams and start catching up with you. The issue is, you've heard it time and time again in draft week. It was in Pete King's article again. Every team basically now wants to trade down. Those edges are going to disappear. It won't take long, and then the advantage will actually be trading up because the price will deflate so much that no one really wants to trade up unless they're trading up for a quarterback, which is the smart way of doing it.
Absolutely. As we wrap things up, definitely go check out both of Jack's articles, the draft analytics board, or the analytics draft board, as I should say, and where are the best players drafted by position. Both of them are available on the dogland.com. Jack, go ahead and plug your Twitter and we'll get on out of here.
Yeah, so it's at Jack Duffin, DUFFIN. DMs are open. Any questions, cap roster building, ping them there. Tweet them, DM them, happy to answer them. But no, all the writings at the Dogland. I don't think I've got anything this side of the draft, but I'll be working on a big series in probably the end of May.
Yay. Always looking forward to those. As we wrap things up, follow me on Twitter at JackMcCurry08. We should be back at some point again this week, whether it's to recap the draft, or we might do another episode before the draft. Don't have anything tentatively planned, but we do things on the fly. So obviously keep it locked here on the Dogland podcast. And until next time, go Browns.
Go Browns.